I want to give all praise and glory to Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai Bahasham Ha Rekah Kodash, double honors unto our apostle elders which rule great millstone wow, and shalom to the hopeful elect of the nation of Israel. May you endure until the end. Shalom wa abba babal. Alright, so it was prophesied in Malachi chapter 4 that we would begin to remember ourselves by remembering the word of Yahweh. It says in Malachi 4 verse 1, "For behold, the day cometh that shall burn as an oven," nuclear destruction, World War III, which America is going to suffer the fate of the nuclear destruction prophesied in the last days. "And all the proud, yea, and all that do wickedly shall be stubble, and the day that cometh shall burn them up, saith Yahweh of hosts, that it shall leave them neither root nor branch." So their kingdom is going to be completely destroyed. The kingdom of Edom, which is known also as Babylon the Great in biblical prophecy, which is another name for the United States. And the nation of Edom, after 1,000 years, is going to be made extinct, which is Isaiah 14, verse 3. It says, "And it shall come to pass in the day that Yahweh shall give thee rest from thy sorrow and from thy fear and from the hard bondage wherein thou was made to serve." Here in America, the United States, also known as the Babylon the Great, it says that thou shalt take up this proverb against the king of Babylon, which is Trump. And he even set up a golden image. All right. He set up a golden image in DC, all right, of him holding this Bitcoin, just as Nebuchadnezzar did in Babylon. All right. Nebuchadnezzar set up an image of himself and demanded that everybody bow to it. All right. So the king of Babylon today is Donald Trump, and Babylon the Great is America, who are to be destroyed, and it's prophesied by nuclear destruction, which is going to be coming from your allies, such as NATO nations, UN nations, and even your enemies, the BRIC nations. It says that thou shalt take up this proverb against the king of Babylon, this prophecy, and say, how hath the oppressor ceased, the golden city ceased, which America is coming to a standstill, and it's going to lead to violence, to war. All right.
Michael McKee from Bloomberg Radio and Television. I'm a little confused by your explanation of the Fed cutting rates because of unemployment. If you think that most of what's happening in the employment area is related to immigration, which your rate cuts wouldn't address, how do you see that as more important than inflation, which has remained almost a full percentage point above your target?
Well, I was saying that what's happening in the labor market has more to do with immigration than it has to do with tariffs. That was the question I was answering. So I wouldn't say that all of what's happening in the labor market is due to tariffs. I mean, you clearly have a slowing in it due to immigration. You clearly have a slowing in demand, which is now perhaps more than that in supply, and we know that because the unemployment rate has ticked up. So that's what I meant by that.
We can follow up. Every year since 2015, the SEP has forecast that you would hit your target 2 years later. And this year, this SEP says you're going to hit your target 2 years later. 2% does not seem to be in sight. Does that suggest that the 2% target is not really achievable? And does this present any credibility problems for you in telling people that that's what you're going to do if you can never reach it?
Well, I mean, you're right. It does say we're going to get to 2% inflation in 2028, at the end of 28. But that's literally how you put the projections together. You're writing down a rate path, which is designed to create, over the course of the SEP, time frame, 2% inflation and maximum employment too. So that's all that is. No one really knows where the economy will be in 3 years. But the nature of the exercise is to write down policy that you believe would return to the 2% goal over at least.
About the slowdown in the jobs market for households at home, especially younger Americans struggling to land a job.
So it's an interesting labor market, and obviously we think it's appropriate that we reduce our rates so that we become more neutral, which presumably will be better for the labor market. You see people who are sort of more at the margins, so kids coming out of college and younger people, minorities, are having a hard time finding jobs. The overall job finding rate is very, very low. However, the layoff rate is also very low. So you've got a low firing, low hiring environment. And the concern is that if you start to see layoffs, the people who are laid off there won't be a lot of hiring going on. So that could very quickly flow into higher unemployment. In a healthier economy, healthier labor market, there would be jobs for those people. But now the hiring rate is very, very low. So that's been a growing concern over the last few months, and it's one of the reasons why we think it's appropriate that we begin to shift our policy focus.
7-2 of July 21, 2014, further amendments to Executive Order 11478, Equal Opportunity in the Federal Government, and Executive Order 11246, Equal Employment Opportunity. And number 4, the Presidential Memorandum of October 5, 2016, promoting diversity and inclusion in the national security workforce. The federal contracting process shall be streamlined to enhance speed, efficiency, and reduce costs, and require federal contractors and subcontractors to comply with our civil rights laws. Accordingly, Executive Order 11246 of September 24, 1965, Equal Employment Opportunity, is hereby revoked for 90 days from the date of this order. Federal contractors may continue to comply with this regulatory scheme in effect on January 20, 2025.
All right, so the system is ceasing to exist. All right, the American dream is turning into a nightmare, and this is prophesied in the Holy Scriptures that Yahweh would do this at the end of our captivity. It says in Isaiah 14:4 that thou shalt take up this proverb, the prophecy against the king of Babylon. America is Babylon, the king of Babylon is Trump, and say, how had the oppressor ceased, the golden city ceased? Yahweh had broken the staff of the wicked and the scepter of the rulers. Why? Because he's gonna destroy this place and save the Israelites, a remnant of the Israelites, and bring them into the promised land. Isaiah 14:1, for Yahweh will have mercy on Jacob and will yet choose Israel and set them in their own land. The Israelites are the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native American Indians of North America, Central America, South America, and the Caribbeans, and set them in their own land, which we've been exiled out of our land because of our sin, which there today in that land is counterfeits. And the strangers, which are Israelites, which the Israelites been scattered throughout the world, shall be joined with them, and they shall cleave to the house of Jacob, which shows that they're Israelites. And the way they're going to cleave to the house of Jacob is by the internet, watching these videos, which they're going to believe on the prophecies which we show that are in the Holy Scriptures. And the people shall bring them, so the Israelites shall take them and bring them to their place, and the house of Israel shall possess them in the land of Yahweh for servants and handmaids, talking about these other nations. And they shall take them captives, whose captives they were, and they shall rule over their oppressors. See? And that's why we're prophesying in these last days by the Spirit of Yahweh, testifying of Yahweh Shai. All right? The Holy Spirit has us standing upon our feet, and great fear fell upon them which saw them. Revelation 11:11. It says, and after 3 days and a half, 350 years after the first slave was brought on the slave ships to the east coast of America from West Africa, right, the Spirit of life from Yahweh Bahasham Yahushai entered into them, starting with Abba Bivens, 1969, in Harlem. And they stood upon their feet, and great fear fell upon them, which saw them, which as we begin to prophesy, they're going to persecute us, right? And it's going to lead to their demise. It says in Revelation 11 and 12, and they heard a great voice from heaven saying unto them, come up hither, and they ascended up to heaven in a cloud, and their enemies beheld them, which it's going to be in the Hebrew, and we're going to be gathered by the angels into the chariot which Yahushua rides. Matthew 24 and 29, immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, nuclear destruction. The stars falling from heaven are the nuclear missiles, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken, which the elite, they're going into bunkers. You could look it up, which if you just put billionaire bunkers, right, it'll pull up information of how the rich are going into bunkers. Look, they even got a Netflix show, watch Billionaire Bunkers on Netflix, right? You got these billionaires dumping money, and not little bits of money, lots of money into these bunkers. And why are they going into the bunkers? Because they're going to try to escape the judgment of nuclear destruction, which is about to take place to America, Babylon the Great, after they make the implantable microchip, the mark of the beast, mandatory for buying and selling according to biblical prophecy. And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, Yahushua, which he's going to come on a chariot, which you know as a so-called UFO. And then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming, which is the Messiah, Yahushua, in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he shall send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. So we're going to go up into a chariot, a so-called UFO. All right, so this is a image of Yahushua with some of the representation of the elect in a chariot looking down on the destruction of Babylon the Great, which is going to be by fire. All right, and then we're going to be brought back into the land, and we're going to restore the land in righteousness, and the heathen are going to be our slaves. All right, starting with the so-called white race and the other nations, they're going to be in slavery under the Israelites. Verse 31, and he shall send his angels with the great sound of a trumpet, which he's going to command them, and they shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. All right. And the Lord is going to destroy the kingdom of Edom, the so-called white race, and bring salvation to the elect. All right. And after 1,000 years of slavery, all right, he's going to go into extinction. Isaiah 14:12, how art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer? Lucifer represents America, the light bearer, son of the morning. This is why everybody wanted to come to America. Or these other countries visit America looking for handouts or to buy weapons or looking for some kind of deal, right? They come to Lucifer, son of the morning. And these presidents, from Obama to Trump, said that America is the one that bears the light for the rest of the world because it is Lucifer. The elite, which they call themselves the Illuminati, rule through America. How art thou cut down to the ground, which didst weaken the nations? How do they weaken the nations? Through their false doctrines, through Christianity, through democracy, through their dollar, through patriotism, right? It says, for thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of Yahweh. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High, which they got a Space Force. Yet thou shalt be brought down to hell, which they're going to go into slavery, to the sides of the pit, that they that see thee shall narrowly look upon thee and consider thee, saying, is this the man that made the earth to tremble? Because they had the ability to call fire down from heaven. They call it hellfire missiles, nuclear missiles that did shake kingdoms, which Trump just said that he would bring wrath upon Afghanistan, right? That's the threat that they use against these nations, is that they have the power to bring fire from heaven upon them, that made the world as a wilderness, and destroyed the cities thereof, that opened not the house of his prisoners, which he never let the Israelites go. He was supposed to let the Israelites go, and he don't want to let us go. In fact, he's trying to bring us in a new form of slavery with that implantable microchips. All right. So I'm going to jump down to verse 21. Prepare slaughter for his sons, for the iniquity of their fathers, that they do not rise nor possess the land, nor fill the face of the world with cities. Right? So we're prophesying to this generation that they're going to go into destruction. But these souls, right, of the heathen, they are from the past generation that did terrible things to the Israelites, like in the time of manifest destiny, right, in the transatlantic slave trade. All right. So these Edomites that are here today are being prepared, and they're going to be slaughtered by nuclear missiles and chariot fire when the Lord returns. For his sons, it says, prepare slaughter, which we prepare you by telling you the truth. And that's why there's a war against the truth, right? Starting from the king of Babylon, where he don't want the truth coming out. Why? Because it's condemning. The truth hurts. When the Edomites have built their whole history on lies, it hurts when we tell the truth. Prepare slaughter for his sons, for the iniquity of their fathers, that they do not rise nor possess the land, nor fill the face of the world with cities. For I will rise up against them, starting with the prophets, saith Yahweh of hosts, and cut off from Babylon the name and remnant and son and nephew, saith Yahweh. So he raises up prophets, and even from pangs to sorrows, he's showing you that it's the end of the so-called white man, Esau, Edom, the wicked, and their time of ruling, right? It says, I will also make it a possession for the bittern and pools of water. I will sweep it with a besom of destruction, saith Yahweh of hosts, which he's going to wipe America off the face of the earth, allowing these other nations to shoot nuclear missiles on America. And then the Edomites are going to be enslaved for 1,000 years and then made extinct because the Lord has no purpose for them. They were created as a weapon of destruction against the Israelite because we sinned. But now that we're repenting, the Lord's now going to judge the Edomite, and there's no purpose for him. It says in Lamentations 4, verse 22, the punishment of thine iniquity is accomplished, O daughter of Zion, which we are repenting in Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai, remembering ourselves as the Israelites. He will no more carry thee away into captivity. He will visit thy iniquity, O daughter of Edom, talking about the so-called white race, the wicked. He will discover thy sins. And how is that happening? Through the prophets, or prophesying the downfall of Babylon and sighing and crying about the abominations that are committed in the midst of Jerusalem, which our people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge, and they lack knowledge because the God of this world, the so-called white man, has deceived them. Esau, Edom, the wicked. All right? But the Lord's going to bring their judgment. All right, it's here in Isaiah 47. It says in verse 1, come down and sit in the dust, O virgin daughter of Babylon. Sit on the ground, there is no throne. O daughter of the Chaldeans, which they built America in witchcraft, for thou shalt be, for thou shalt no more be called tender and delicate, which all these other nations wanted to come to America, thinking that they had an American dream to prosper by and get rich, which now you see that there's war in the streets, especially against the so-called immigrant. They're removing the freedom of speech. Once again, they're removing your ability to operate with equal opportunity, which came with civil rights. So it's no longer called tender or delicate. In fact, there's a report that America is one of the most violent places on earth. It says in verse 2, take the millstone and grind the mill, uncover thy locks, and it says, make bare the leg, uncover the thigh, pass over the rivers, which their shame is being revealed through the internet. Thy nakedness shall be uncovered, yea, thy shame shall be seen, and is being seen through the internet. I will take vengeance, and I will not meet thee as a man. When Yahushua comes back, he's coming from heaven, and he's coming on a chariot, a so-called UFO, and the host of heaven is with him. As for our Redeemer, Yahweh's son, Yahushua, Yahweh of hosts is his name, the Holy One of Israel. So Yahweh, the Heavenly Father, is going to command his son, Yahushua, to come and deliver us, which he redeemed us through his sacrifice, and he sits at the right hand of the Father waiting to return to deliver us, which I just read to you, that he's going to command his angels, the host of heaven, to gather us into that chariot. And that's all commanded by Yahweh, the Heavenly Father. Sit thou silent and get thee into darkness, O daughter of the Chaldeans, for thou shalt no more be called the Lady of Kingdoms, which America is a whore, all right, which it had all these nations confederate with it, but it's going to start to turn its back. One of the reasons is because it's causing chaos to these economies of these other nations, the European nations, the European Union, and UN nations, and even the BRIC nations. And this is why they're going to want to burn this whore, America. It says in verse 6, I was wroth with my people. I have polluted mine inheritance and given them into thine hand. Thou didst show them no mercy upon the ancient. Hast thou very heavily laid thy yoke. which they don't care about the old or the young, right? They work you to death, and they even try to destroy you in your mother's womb. It says, and thou sayest, I shall be a lady forever, which that's the pride of this place, so that thou didst not lay these things in thy heart, meaning you didn't think you would ever have to pay for what you did to the Israelites, neither did it remember the later end of it, which let me get that in the NLT. It says, you said, I will reign forever as queen, which queen means whore of the world, because you have all these other nations in bed with you. You did not reflect on your actions or think about their consequences. It says in verse 8, therefore, hear now this, that thou art given to pleasures, which it tells you in the scriptures, anyone that's given over to pleasure is dead already. That dwelleth carelessly, that saith in thine heart, I am and none else beside me. I shall not sit as a widow, neither shall I know the loss of sons. But these two things shall come to thee in a moment, in one day, the loss of sons and widowhood. They shall come upon thee in their perfection, for the multitude of thy sorceries, and for the great abundance of thine enchantments, which are against the Israelites. America is a prison created in witchcraft against the Israelites, which these Edomites are very proud, and they don't think no one could bring them down. Revelation 18 and verse 5, it says, for her sins have reached unto heaven, and our power hath remembered her iniquities, because he hears our crying. Reward her even as she rewarded you, and double unto her double according to her works. And the cup which she hath filled to her double. How much she hath glorified herself, and lived deliciously. And it says, so much torment and sorrow give her. For she saith in her heart, I sit a queen and am no widow, and shall see no sorrow. That's the pride of this place. That everybody better respect America, or you're going to suffer fire from heaven, which they have missile systems. Therefore shall her plagues come in one day, death and mourning and famine, and she shall be utterly burned with fire, for strong is Yahweh's power who judgeth her, which the Lord's going to send his son Yahushai to bring forth this judgment, which is Revelation 19 and 11. It says, and I saw heaven open, and behold, a white horse, which is a throne, and he that sat upon him, Yahushai, was called faithful and true, which he's fulfilling the prophecies, the commandments of Yahweh. And in righteousness he doth judge and make war. Verse 13, verse 14. And the armies which were in heaven followed him upon white horses, clothed in fine linen, white and clean. And out of his mouth goeth a sharp sword, which is a laser beam, that with it he should smite the nations, and he shall rule them with a rod of iron, and he treadeth the winepress of the fierceness and wrath of Almighty Yahweh. So he's fulfilling the command of Yahweh, the Heavenly Father. And he hath on his vesture and on his thigh a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords, which is going to be on his garment. That's his title. Now, going back to Revelation 17, verse 1, and there came one of the seven angels which had the seven vials, and talked with me, saying, unto me, come hither, I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore, that sitteth upon many waters, which these many waters are nations. It says, Verse 15, and he saith unto me, the waters which thou sawest where the horse sitteth are peoples, and multitude, and nations, and tongues.
Please raise their hand.
What you're witnessing is the UN, the United Nations, voting for a ceasefire in Gaza. The woman in red represents the United States.
Those against.
See, these nations are going to despise America, all right, because it's a bloody city. And you can see all these nations are against America, all right, and where the horse sitteth are many nations. So it says in verse 16, and the 10 horns, which is the European Union nations, which thou sawest upon the beast is NATO, which they have the military might NATO, which are European nations. These shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire. Countries I asked, which are suffering from tariffs, it says major European economies are suffering from the effects of tariffs, particularly Germany and Ireland, due to rising trade tensions with the United States and China, which China is part of the BRIC nations. The tariffs are impacting exports in key sectors such as automobiles, pharmaceuticals, and agriculture, leading to economic uncertainty and potential job loss. All right, it says affected countries and industries. Germany, the country with the most to lose from U.S. tariffs. Germany's economy relies heavily on vehicle exports. New U.S. tariffs of 25% on auto imports and potential reciprocal tariffs on U.S. vehicles and parts are forecast to hit the German economy hard. Ireland is highly exposed to potential U.S. tariffs, particularly in the pharmaceutical sector. Pharmaceuticals account for 15% of the EU's European Union good exports to the U.S., and tariffs as high as 200% on these products could cost Ireland a cumulative let me get that read out. Cumulative 3% of its real GDP by 2028. Central and Eastern Europe, smaller economies like Austria, Hungary, Poland, and Slovakia are also affected due to their integration into Germany's industrial supply chains, particularly in the automotive industry. All right, at the same time, they're about to go to war, a world war, all right, that they're being drawn in by the small hats, the big nose counterfeits that are in our land. All right. All right. And as they're going into war, being drawn into the war by the small hat, big nose counterfeits in our land, right, with Russia, China, and these other BRIC nations, the U.S., the whore, wants to withdraw from NATO. The European Union nations, which they have NATO, the military, the teeth of that beast. It says the United States has maintained long-standing support to NATO. Most recently, the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2024, enacted on December 22nd, 2023, prohibits the president from unilaterally withdrawing from NATO without approval of a 2/3 Senate supermajority or an act of Congress. All right. It says, however, President Donald Trump's past and current rhetoric has created significant tensions with the alliance. Concerns about U.S. commitment to NATO are primarily driven by Trump's comments, questioning the alliance's relevance and his willingness to enforce its collective defense clause, Article 5, particularly for nations that do not meet defense spending targets, which he complains about the nations of the European Union, part of NATO, not putting in as much as the United States financially. All right. So this is causing division. And as the Lord said, if Satan be divided, how could his house or his kingdom stand? So it shall surely fall. And America is going to fall like lightning because of nuclear destruction. And its allies and enemies, the allies being the NATO nations, which go back to the European Union, and the UN nations, where the horse sitteth. These are people, the United Nations, all right, which the headquarters of the UN are here in America, in New York, and these nations are losing their love for this whore, and they're gonna burn her with fire with the help of the BRIC nations. Shalom to the elect. Wa ba ba ba.